Across Nigeria, thousands of citizens, in particular its young people, took to the streets to demand an end to the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, popularly known as SARS, which for years has been known for its brutalization and extrajudicial killings of many innocent
When I was at home around 2, suddenly he left for the toll gates, and since then he has never returned.
Started shooting. I know everybody was scared.
They are killing my people!
Some were shot at the shoulder, some at the chest, some at the forehead, but I couldn't find my brother among them.
Across Nigeria, thousands of citizens, in particular its young people, took to the streets to demand an end to the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, popularly known as SARS, which for years has been known for its brutalization and extrajudicial killings of many innocent.
When I was at home around 2, suddenly he left for the toll gates, and since then he has never returned.
Started shooting. I know everybody was scared.
They are killing my people!
Some were shot at the shoulder, some at the chest, some at the forehead, but I couldn't find my brother among them.
Nigeria recently commemorated its 60th independence anniversary. Its citizens greeted the day with mixed feelings. Many, while grateful for a country they could call their own, were saddened by its poor development indices, in particular endemic poverty and insecurity. Many attribute this state of affairs to bad governance, but feel constrained in hearing their views on this. The civic space in Nigeria has increasingly become repressed, and free speech has become increasingly difficult.
How can you decree capital punishment for exercising, quote unquote, a God-given right, which is freedom of speech? We were not born in silence. We were born with the facility of speech. And speech is supposed to be the conveyance of the realities of life as we see, as we experience that life.
The government has also sought to regulate civil society through draconian legislation with very troubling narrative. The government has also sought to regulate civil society through draconian legislation with very troubling narratives. Across Nigeria, thousands of citizens, in particular its young people, took to the streets to demand an end to the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, popularly known as SARS, which for years has been known for its brutalization and extrajudicial killings of many innocent.
I was at home around 2. Suddenly he left for the toll gates, and since then he has never returned.
Started shooting. I know everybody was scared.
They are killing my people. Dodging bullets.
Some were shot at the shoulder, some at the chest, some at the forehead, but I couldn't find my brother among them.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that good evening isn't sounding too formal, but good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for making our time to join this conversation. And if by some chance you can't hear me, please let me know. Or maybe I should just turn on my camera for a bit. The production studio I'm using is not properly lit, so I was thinking to avoid that until I get somewhere that is a lot clearer to use. Okay, can hear me. That is good to know. Welcome to this webinar, and it's been interesting conversation even on radio talking about the day. It's the third anniversary of the NSAS, and it brings to mind all that happened, what the call is for in the first instance to end police brutality, which is the call by a lot of young people who came out en masse to agitate for better treatment of Nigerian people, Nigerian youth, and end the profiling and end the police brutality. And we know what happened at 6 p.m. on that fateful day, how quite a number of people were wounded and some unfortunately killed. Nigerians have held their ground since then to finding both the white paper from Lagos State government to get accountability on the part of the government. People are even still asking who gave the order and whatnot. But 3 years after, the big question is how much has changed? Has the brutality ended? Have they accounted for the lives of the people who were lost on that day? So it's great that we're having this conversation today. And I'm particularly excited with the lineup of people. I want to say a very big thank you to Global Right and the partners. I think Let's Mon, or in this together to ensuring that we have these conversation. My name is Kimberly Mwachuku. I'm a broadcast journalist with 95.1 Nigeria Info FM, and I will be the moderator of the conversation today. It's going to be 55 minutes of intense discourse from all of our panelists, and also would give those who are joining us, I see more people are joining, which is great, to ask their questions and bring different perspective to the conversation also. So you're all welcome, and I hope you had a pleasant day, but this conversation is one that is absolutely needed on a day like this. And to just give us a quick opening remark, I would want to call on our very special guest, the country director of Global Right, Abby Bio, to give us an opening remark. Abby, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for making the time to be here with us this evening. Before we start, I'm going to ask that we respectfully observe a moment of silence in remembrance of those who lost their lives during the NSAS protest. And we have to say their names because they were people like you and I. They were Nigerians as well. And some of the names you would recognize, some of them you do not recognize, but they were Nigerians. They died. Like the Holocaust, some people deny that it happened in the first place. But first, let's respectfully listen to some of the names that we have and observe a moment of silence in respect of these people who stood up for our country and demanded for equity, for justice, and for human rights. Victor Sunday Ibanga, Abuta Solomon, Jide, Nicholas Okwe, Okala Patrick Ayide, Olalekan Faleye, Mabel Enaji, Joshua Samuel, Lucky Philemon, Ajoku Japhet, Okwe Kehinde, Charles Chinedu Ozioma, Damilola Adedayo, Andrew Ugochukwu, Etiom Samuel, Isaac Amede, Felix Nandip, Emmanuel John, Simon Abu Raymond, Moses Adams, Savior Osike, Moses Oyi, Unisa Adamu, John Harrison, Solomon Samuel Agi, Theophilus David, Ayogwo Trust, Olamide Dauda, Samuel Ishola, Abwe Roland Thomas, Emmanuel Ogbonna, Joshua James, Paul Femi, Olalekan Sanusi, Olalekan Abdin Ashafa, Olalekan Ajasa, Kolade Salami, Folorunsho Olabisi, Kenechukwu Ugo, Abiodun Adesanya, Ifeanyi Nicholas Eji, Tola Wisdom, Ifeanyi Agbeze, Nata Samuel Ozimeze, Nathaniel Solomon, Ayodeji Beckley, Onileowo legend. All Nigerians like you and I with dreams of a nation that should work. Let's observe a minute of silence in respect of these heroes who pay the ultimate price for a country where peace and justice reigns. May they rest in power. May their sacrifices never be in vain. Thank you for making the time to be here. We are Nigerians, all on this call, or most of us, and we have a singular purpose, a country that works for its citizen, a country where sovereignty is vested in the people of Nigeria, for whom government holds it in trust. We're people who care about what happens to the country Nigeria, who have also lived with the displeasure, with the pain and the agony of watching the civic freedoms backslide over time. The big question is, how do we move forward from this? How do we reconcile our country and the tragedies of bad governance? How do we demand accountability? It's my hope today that we do not just have a conversation in memory of this beloved fallen heroes, but that we also begin to pave a way forward and have candid conversations on accountability in governance, and of course, of the strengthening of our civic space. I'd like to thank my sisters. I'd like to thank Kemi, Rinu, Kim, and of course, the gentleman with us, Mr. Ojo and Ikemesit. And I look forward to a fruitful deliberation this evening. Please forgive me for being very emotional. But then if you listened that night live as the bullets flew, not just on Facebook. I also had a friend who lived very close to Lekki toll gates. And as he spoke to me, I heard the shots in the background. You would remember that night with aura, that we crossed thresholds that no nation should ever cross with its citizens. May Nigeria be a prosperous and a great nation in our time. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you very much. And we'll say amen to the prayer for Nigeria. And I'm sure a lot of people can totally understand the emotions because of the nature of the horror of what happened and the fact that people are still asking and demanding for accountability as we speak, 3 years after. And I'm confident that with the lineup of panelists that we have, that the conversation is going to be a rich one and would, bet a lot of questions and perhaps ways to engage with the relevant authorities in the near future and how the country should stand and treat its young people and citizens moving forward. Now, without wasting any much time, I just need to introduce our lineup of panelists for the conversation today. 3 years on, reflections on the impact of citizen-led activism. As we have this conversation, I'm sure that those who are joining us will also have other questions and dimensions they want to bring to it. To start off with, we have here, I see she's on already, Kemi Okeyodo, who is the Executive Director, Partners West Africa, Nigeria. You are welcome, ma'am. Really nice having you on board this conversation. And you're welcome.
Hi, Kimberly.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
We also have Mr. Jide Ojo. He's the Executive Director, OJA Development Consult, OJA Development Consult, that is. I went through the participants. I don't think I saw Mr. Jide Ojo. Maybe he's still warming up. Or if you're here, sir, you can just let us know that you're on already. You're welcome.
Yeah, good evening, Kim. I'm here
Good
already.
evening. Aha, you're welcome. We have Rinu, who Oduala. Rinu is the project director of Z-Hub NG. You're welcome, Rinu.
Yes,
hello.
thank you very much.
Welcome. And Ikemesit Efyong, who is a partner SBM Intelligence. Ikemesit, you're welcome. Good evening.
Good evening, Kimberly. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you so much. Now, starting off the conversation, for those who are just joining us, please, like Avi mentioned, let's just respect the rule of the room so that we don't come in with so much noise to distract from the conversation. You can keep your video on if you want to speak. For our panelists, you're allowed to be on and your mic's on. But for others coming in, please, I hope you to be muted from the get-go so that we don't get too much interference. Now, I'm going to start with... All right. I'm going to start with Renu because I was on Twitter earlier on. I saw a few of your thoughts and I would love to start off with you. You're one of those who, was active, talking about this, sharing thoughts and standing your ground on what really transpired 3 years ago when Nigerians were brutalized, when Nigerians came out in their numbers, which a lot of people attest to, that it was an organic gathering of Nigerians demanding for an end to police brutality and how it played out eventually. 3 years on, give us your candid opinion, just starting with that, as you said, the stage, as to how it's been when it comes to the cause that brought people out 3 years back and where we stand today.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this. I think that it's an overwhelming day for many of us, and for me, I've not just been in the mental space to like say anything or talk about anything, I'll have there is also room for like constructive engagement, especially with civil society organizations who are doing the work, which is why I would like to say thank you to Global Rights for continuing, to track, document, and support the movement. I like to say thank you to a lot of civil society organizations, because there are not a lot of CSOs that keep supporting a movement, especially years after. So having said that, I would not like to remind us of where we came from. I would like to remind us of where we are at right now. That despite the widespread protests of 2020, thousands of young Nigerians going on the streets in Nigeria, not just in Nigeria, across Africa, across the world, to protest against police brutality that is happening in Nigeria. It is unfortunate that right now police brutality is still ongoing in Nigeria, and it's not just ongoing on the scale as it was before the protest, and it has increased, as can be attested to by many civil society organizations. There are a lot of extortions going on, extrajudicial killings going on, torture going on, and the usual like that we all know, sexual abuse. And what makes it worse is that the police officers are even more emboldened, because if a global movement like that of NSAS could happen, and there are no repercussions, there are no consequences, there are no meaningful reforms or change happening in the police institution, then they could do an undo. So we've returned back to the era of I will kill you and nothing will happen. And nothing is actually happening, which is why it's important to have this conversation, constructive conversations tonight, that despite the protests, despite the names that have been revealed out tonight, despite the death of so many young Nigerians, innocent protesters, even bystanders, people that were not protesting at all. Just weeks ago or a month or two ago, there was the leaked memo of 103 bodies that are being planned by the Lagos state government to be mass buried. This is 3 years after the state government and the federal government kept denying that nobody died during the protest and nothing happened. So it's important, to call out the silence. It's important to call out the nonchalance. It's important to call out the fact that police brutality is still ongoing in 2023, where countries, are moving forward in advancement. Young Nigerians are still afraid of living in their own country, and nothing is being done about it. The list keep increasing. The names keep adding to the numbers. For how long will we keep reeling out names? For how long will we keep, documenting names of citizens who are being killed by the people who are supposed to protect them? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The ugly picture and the fact that the killing is still going on makes it even more troubling. And even though, Reno, you said, yes, you don't want to remind us of where we're coming from, but sometimes to even assess certain things and put it in the right context, you need to also look at where we're coming from, what informed the need for people to come out so organically to a point where a movement was started to end in SARS. And I'm going to go to Ikemisit at this point in time to looking at the pre-NSAD state, because looking at some of the data and the comprehensive mass atrocity tracker that was put out by Global Rights, it revealed that between 2020 and the first half of 2023, at least 848 lives have been lost extrajudiciously, violence, with about 127 individuals falling victim during the first half of 2023 alone. So it still tells you that we're still dealing with tons and pockets of this nature of this violence. And some of them, a good number of them, are also perpetrated by, state actors and authorities. So to looking at the level of it, Ikeme said, I would love to start with that, to saying, what informs this? Because we have rules, we have regulations, we have laws. We're signed to a lot of treaties and conventions that promote human rights and allow for certain things to happen within, the confines of fundamental human rights. How is it that for so long we still have state-sponsored violence in Nigeria?
Good evening once again, and thanks for having me. Thanks for the question, Kimberly. I apologize. I'm in an airport lounge now, so my background is very active. But I'll do well to summarize my point. The reason why this can happen, the reason why this can occur, is because Nigeria is set within the crescendo of a very high violence and a very high insecurity framework. I love the number that Global Rights put out in terms of the extrajudicial killings, right? You know, a little under 900 between the Lekki massacre and now. That's set within the backdrop of every year since 2020, a little over 10,000 Nigerians, according to our numbers that we can verify, have died every year. So think about that. From 2020 up until now, we're thinking about close to 30,000 lives that have been lost to all forms of security challenges right across the country. Now, set within that backdrop, the sector of extrajudicial killings doesn't stand out. Why the Lekki massacre was a really seminal point was that we had one of those few mass casualty events where the government itself was the perpetrator, not an not an uninterested bystander, not the purveyor of decades of institutional failure in dealing with insecurity in this country. They were the perpetrator themselves in a mass casualty, high visibility, high traffic environment as the Lekki toll booths. But this happens every day in Nigeria. People get shot all the time. We track specifically incidents involving the extrajudicial killing by security authorities, right? And this even includes the police and the security agencies themselves. So we count their numbers, and every quarter, something like 100 plus security operatives themselves, right, are killed and are victims of this lack of an institutional reckoning with the sector of insecurity in this country. So in the end, the conversation around dealing with extrajudicial killings has to do with what we are going to do about strengthening our institutions that manage security in this country. How do we recalibrate, right, our approach towards managing, right, security in this country when we see every security challenge as a nail? We would always move in with a hammer. And because that has been the DNA of our security management institutions for decades, there is very little training, there's very little understanding in separating who is supposed to be protected from who are the perpetrators. Everyone looks like a perpetrator. Every attempt to institute institutional accountability seems like a threat to the government of the day. And that's why you would have situations and unfortunate incidents and unfortunate tragedies like the Lekki massacre. So reckoning with how we recalibrate our institutional framework to engage, to listen, to do the hard work of reckoning with the subtext, the underlying factors that continue to feed into our security challenges in this country. It is what we need to do. And that's why remembrances and conversations like this are very, very critical, because they give us an opportunity to go back to the basics, go back to what really matters about this. If not, we will continue to have unfortunate situations like this. The final point I'm going to make is, let us be very, very clear-eyed about this. The Lekki massacres occur almost every day in Nigeria. Whether it's 10 people, 3 people, 2 people, 20 people that are the victims of institutional failure on the part of our government and our leaders, they occur every day. So let's always, as we engage, as we think about these questions, never forget that this is not a one-off, this is not an outlier, this is the norm, unfortunately, in Nigeria today.
Thank you very much. And so far, our two speakers, Reno and Ikemesit, have established the facts that indeed the violence is still going on. I'm sure people who follow the news will still get reports filtering in constantly of this level of police brutality, even though we got the police committing itself to reforms after the NSAS, and we saw how they reorganized the structure and said they were going to disband the SARS itself and come up with the SWAT, even though we don't know where that is at the moment. But this ugliness apparently is still going on. So, Keme said you talked about recalibrating our approach to security management in Nigeria, which is very important because I recall some time back when the heat of Boko Haram and the Jonathan administration, one of the reasons we're not getting weapons is because of, reports from the US saying there's a lot of human rights abuses, there's a lot of extrajudicial killing, there's a lot of brutality on the part of uniformed men. And so we're not going to give you weapons. And it cost us a lot in the fight against Boko Haram. But till date, we still have it in different form, such that even the idea of a gathering and a protest, which is even backed by laws in Nigeria, is a frightening one for a lot of young people. This is where I get to Mr. Jideojo, to looking at it. It's been established. Yes, these things are still going on. And talking about using Ikemisid's words about recalibrating the approach and how we go about it. We have seen government make statement as to what we do right, what we're reorganizing, what we're rearranging, but it's still going on at the moment. How do you speak to that in terms of post-NSAS? And we're still waiting for, before we even get to that question, I'll save that till later, because there's also one important thing to look at as to the outcome, the panels that were set up, the recommendations that were put out, the reports that were put out. Till date, one isn't really clear what even the position is. And that's why we have days like this where people are still asking questions. Who has been convicted, who has been charged, and who has been dismissed for how it was handled? Mr. Ojo, I would love to hear from you if you have any answers to that whatsoever, before we get to some of the reforms that were introduced and how much change they've brought, if any.
Okay, thank you very much, Kim. Permit me to just speak. My background here is dark because there's no light and it's rainy. I can't put on my gen. So bear with me that you only hear my voice and not see my face.
Okay, sir.
Very good questions you've asked, Kim. Let me ride on what earlier speakers have said, that yes, human rights abuses are still on, police brutality, extortion, exploitation is still on. But likewise, every other society, we should not make it look like it's only in Nigeria this happens. If you recall that the George Floyd's murder in US happened in May of 2020, and before NSAS in 2020, October. But that is not justification. I mean, the fact that it happens in other climates is not sufficient justification to say it should happen in Nigeria. But we know that Nigeria policing system is, given the pre-colonial nature, is violent prone. If police hasn't tortured you, they don't believe you can say the truth. If police haven't, there are still a lot of people that are being made to suffer what is called structural and psychological violence. Even where they didn't torture, there are things that, structurally, when they say bail is free, is bail really free as we speak? Is bail free? So we still have all of these things going on. But let me also, before I forget, I talked about the extrajudicial murder of Bolanle Rahim on Christmas Day in 2022. Luckily, that has been addressed. The ASP, Vandy, who was responsible for that just last month, has been sentenced to death by hanging. And that is about the fastest I've ever seen, because the whole trial lasted for barely 9 months in a country where you used to see years and years of prosecution with that much. So in terms of, yes, 28 out of 36 states set up different committees or commission of inquiries headed by judges or retired chief judges of the states and all of that. And they have all submitted their reports. Some sat for 3 months, some sat for 6 months, some for longer period. I think Lagos sat for much more than every other state, maybe because it was the epicenter of that whole crisis. And to the best of my knowledge, what has happened majorly is compensation to victims of this NSAS protest. That's not even across board, but some states have paid some measures of compensation. But in terms of prosecution, I haven't heard of any. And if you recall, Kim, about the time that NSAS happened, it stampeded the National Human Rights Committee to publish a report of police brutality that they have investigated. And names were mentioned, and one had expected that at least these people were fingered in having committed one form of brutality or the other will have had their days in court. But it would seem like the last administration was very non-committal in terms of prosecution. And, you know, after all the 28 state commission of inquiries, judicial commission of inquiries have sat and submitted their report, you know the way it is in government. They will set up another committee that will issue white paper. So the white paper committee in many states haven't even come up with their, because when you say white paper, it means government will look at the initial report and say which one is taking, which one is rejecting, and all of that. So I think we get bogged with preparation for elections, and everybody lost sight of demanding for prosecution of those who have been fingered. And I must also say, even though it may not be something we are aversing our minds to, that police also suffered enormously in terms of death. I think over 30 policemen were also brutally murdered during that NSAS. Many police stations were touched. Many of their operational vehicles were destroyed. So while we call for justice for the innocent victims of NSAS protest, we must also call for some measure of compensation for the families of those who also gruesomely get murdered by the protesters, or, I don't want to say the NSAS protesters, but one way or the other, when the thing went out of hand, we know that many innocent policemen also get murdered in the course of that mindless killing. There are also others who suffered vicariously. Like Kim, the Apple motor dealers and motor mats, where some of the protesters allegedly went and burnt dozens of vehicles. People who never even joined in the protest, nobody has compensated those people who lost fortune as a result of the protest. So while it is important for policemen who have been identified and were known to have been engaged in one form of brutality or the other, why it is important for us to pressure this new administration. We now have a new administration, new sheriff is in town. And I could see that he's doing a lot to appease the people. I just read short while ago that Tinubu has approved that the 8-month salaries of ASU members that were seized by the immediate past administration should be paid, as well as doctors. So he's trying to buy legitimacy. And I think it's time for us in civil society to engage and call for prosecution of those who have been documented to have engaged in, act of violence, act of exploitation, brutality. But while we do that, we should not also forget even members of the Nigerian police force who have been extrajudicially murdered also demand and deserve to be compensated for their families, and those who are maimed also should be taken care of in a way, so that because who wants to come to equity must come with clean hands. They are even though we condemn their excesses, they are also compatriots, they are also Nigerians, they are also members of our society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ojo, for that. Yes, reminding of some of the things that really happened, and quite a lot happened at different parts of the country, aside from the epicenter, which is Lagos and the Lekki toll gate. We know how, like wildfire, is spread to different parts of the country, and there were a lot of different reactions to the NSAS, to even the different narrative that greeted it, coming from even the corridors of the government as to we want to hijack our government and or whatnot. That's why it's important to always have these anniversaries to remind us, because there were a lot of things to distill from October 2020, indeed. Thank you, Mr. Ojo, for that. And women played an important role in the NSAS movement. I mean, Renu is here, and she's one of those people I see her face, and I think of that activism, that energy, like, oh, someone died, oh, we need to call out this, it needs to end. We can't continue in this way where young people are profiled, young people are labeled as criminals or treated like they're not first-class citizens in their own country. So there are a lot of women, groups like the Feminist Coalition, contributing financial support, medical support, food, and all whatnot, to ensure that just kept the momentum and the fire of that particular movement going on. Kemi, I will come to you with this point, with this particular one here, because we need to also look and evaluate the gender dimension. That's no disrespect to all the men, young men, women, and all those who gathered, but it's just also look at one element of it where women were also the face of this and demanding justice, demanding accountability, demanding an end to the brutality, particularly in a country where we're seeing the number of women depleting in our National Assembly, Senate, House of Representatives. In our State Assembly, we have almost zero number of women. When it comes to appointment, we're still literally begging for a significant amount of women to be appointed. I'm curious to find out from you, Kemi, what you make of this, and what this says about women and young people in Nigeria. The fact that we could have a lot of people put themselves out, even though it was in the line of fire, to actually demanding for accountability.
Thank you, Kimberly, and thanks to Global Rights for the opportunity to be part of this conversation. Over the years, looking at the public safety space and looking at studying how women interact within the public safety space. When people say that women are not active, it's totally not true. Women are usually active as financiers, enablers, even mobilizers. Right. So, and that's what played out again during the NSAS movement. So that support from behind, you see, I'll say it's a space that we have always been in. And it's not only within the formal space, even within the informal space. So even if you look at the non-state actors in their operations and what have you, you find that the women are the ones that provide the tokens or the resources in which they use in organizing, in which they use in working, quote and unquote. I think what also took it a bar up is that we saw faces of young women on the streets during the NSAS protests. You've said it. And we also saw how the feminist movement also created space without hogging it for the young people that were on the streets to be in front of the media, you know, owning the process, creating that enabling environment for them to own the process. There were conversations, I know I was part of some of the conversations that helped to frame some of the issues appropriately, so that it feeds into years of efforts of reform that has been ongoing in the country. So I guess that's what we saw. And you see women within media. We saw DJ, I've forgotten her name now, the lady in Lekki, at Lekki, yeah? So we, I mean, you see, DJ Switch, thank you, DJ Switch, yeah? So you see us at different level. What we see within the political space is the factor of the activities within the political parties. So within the political parties, they have not liberalized or opened up the space for women to engage. So at the end of the day, it's garbage in, garbage out. Pardon my choice of words. So within the political parties, they have not created space. They do not see that women have a role to play beyond the low rate role they've given, right? And that is what we see within the political space. If you look at other spaces within Nigeria, I stand corrected, you see us taking our spaces. And you see us even taking our spaces beyond even some of the developed countries. Yeah, you see women in spaces, breaking glass ceilings in Nigeria, private sector, civil society organizations, within the media, within academia, right? Even within the judiciary. We've produced how many CJs? Even at the level of the Supreme Court, we Chief Justice. Look at some of the developed countries, maybe not yet, right? So that we are grappling with. So we need to understand that and need to appreciate that women in Nigeria are the activists predates even colonial rule, right? It's there in history. Queen Amina of Zaza, you had Moremi in Ife. And then if you come down, you had the About Women's Riot and how the women's engagement in social movement tilts the space, tilts discussion, and also contributes to citizens' activism. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Yes, someone reminded me about even before the colonizers came around that women have been playing a very significant role in different regions of the country. So like we say in Nigerian parlance, no be today. Thank you very much for that. If you're joining, don't worry. I see people asking if they can join the conversation. You will in a bit. Get to share your thoughts, your questions also. So just keep them close by. You can leave them as a chat, or we'll just give you the mic at some point in time to share your thoughts with us on as we mark the 3rd anniversary of the October 2020 NSAS protests that people are still asking questions even till date. Rina, I'm going to come back to you. You know, we talked about women. You're one of the faces of the women, the forefront, and it felt like you put a lot on the line to ensure that the brutality end. And when you were speaking and saying it continues, sometimes, you know, I often ask myself, if I put myself in the middle of a struggle and years down the road, it feels like little has changed, how will I feel? I mean, how do you even get the energy to go on? I know it feels like a personalized question at this point in time. People contributed in so many ways, but then how do you get that fuel, that energy going to say, no, this must end. We must get accountability. We must correct it. When Mr. Ojo was talking, he did mention the Bolanle Rahim's case, and we saw the speed at which it was resolved. A death sentence was handed. It's one thing if the governor is going to sign it at the end of the day, but some sort of closure coming to saying this cannot be condoned. I bet it's some of the things you would have hoped to see happening even more often than not. Yes? Hello?
Yes. Can you ask me the question again?
Okay.
I just wanted to
we're looking at the fact that being female, we just took off from where we ended the conversation with Kemi, and women being some of the strong faces, and you were one of those in the forefront who put a lot on the line. And 3 years down the road, you did mention at the start that it's still going on. And the key question is, I mean, how do you continue to make this demand in the face of the fact that it's still happening? But then we had one case in which we saw it resolved quickly, Bolanle Rahim, who was killed in Lagos on Christmas Day. And already there's some sort of closure because a death penalty has been handed to the police officers. This is what we hope to see, right? And hoping that it will serve as a deterrent to all trigger-happy police officers and military personnel in the country. So I wanted to find out from you, after the struggle which is still going on, how you get the energy to just continue, in spite of the fact that the slow pace of the results is one that can be frustrating.
Thank you very much for repeating that. I think that with the Bolanle Rahim case, if I was to answer that, it's very unprecedented. And that's why some of us, decided to thank the judges, and some people are still saying that, this doesn't happen in every case, just like you just said. It doesn't happen all the time. And one of the factors that you can point to is because Bolanle Rahim was also a lawyer. And despite the fact that lawyers have been complaining of harassment, lawyers have been complaining of brutality in the hands of the state, nothing has been done about it. Nothing was done about it until a lawyer eventually fell victim of the same police brutality that young people have been talking about. So I would say that that was why it even led to the fast track, because you've had, I think Global Rights has released numbers. I was checking the Instagram. I think I saw about 800 plus people have been killed by security from 2019 till now. How many of the killers of those 800 plus people have gotten death penalties? How many of them are still hiding, still walking around with guns today? Killers walking around with guns in uniform. So why Bolanle Rahim case is a very how do I say, just like we said, fast track case, and it makes people say that there is at least some sort of closure. But what about the rest? What about the rest that are not lawyers? What about the rest that are still, that have been killed in the society and nothing has been done to their killers? Then to the question that you asked about how do we keep the energy going, I think it comes from the anger that this is still ongoing. It comes from fear as well, that I could die. It comes from being afraid that the names that the executive director of Global Rights was reeling out when we started this program, that name could have been Rino Odwala, that name could have been anybody in this room as well. They said that it's not a matter of when, it's not a matter of if it will happen to you. It's a matter of when it will happen to you. Those people who died, they are not ghosts. They're not statistics. They're not just numbers. Nobody just went to pull out their name from one place and say, oh, I just out their names. They were Nigerians too. There were people like you and I. They had families, they had friends, they had loved ones, they had aspirations, they had goals. And which is why I want to come back to when we say that police brutality is happening in other countries. Yes, police brutality is a global issue, but let us be clear. Acknowledging and fighting against police brutality in Nigeria doesn't mean that we're not aware that police brutality is happening in the USA. It is about holding our own authorities accountable. It's about ensuring justice for fellow Nigerians. It's about ensuring that we can live in peace, dignity, and freedom in our own country. So let us not use the excuse that it happens elsewhere to begin to point fingers elsewhere. Monsurat Ojuade was killed in 2021. She was just an 18-year-old young school leaver. She was waiting for a university acceptance letter to go to the university. She was killed right in her own home by Sergeant Phillips. So the fact that it's happening everywhere, it happened with George Floyd, doesn't mean that it should happen to Monsurat. The same thing happened to Tina Ezekwe in May 2020, where she was killed the same time around George Floyd. The fact that it happened to George Floyd doesn't mean that it should happen to Tina Ezekwe. And there's no new sheriff in town. Let us not deceive ourselves. The same political party that orchestrated the killings of protesters in 2020 are still in power. And then we say that there's a new sheriff in town. And we couldn't even make a single example of what he has done regarding police brutality. Even with George Floyd case that we're mentioning, the states in the United States have approved over or close to 300 police reform bills after Floyd was killed in 2020. Please tell me, how many police reform bills have been approved in Nigeria? How many police reform bills have been approved even in Lagos, even in Oyo State, in Edo State, in State? What has actually got to do with police brutality that we're talking about today? And then we talked about police dying. Well, I acknowledge and believe that we should acknowledge the fact that police officers were killed by unscrupulous elements during the protest. It doesn't mean that there are no underlying factors that led to the protest in the first place. If police officers were not killing protesters, none of this, were not killing citizens, Nigerians in the first place, none of this would have even happened. And we say protesters went to hijack somewhere. They went to steal stuff from somewhere, and other people were not compensated. Please, when we put the tag protesters on them. It is very dangerous for narratives because we are all aware about how the state actually sponsored hoodlums, to go hijack the protest, to go shoot at protesters, to go do so many unscrupulous elements, all to paint this on protesters. So it is very crucial that we stop using protesters because we don't have evidence for that. And then let me come back to the question of being angry, because it's important to stay angry. It's important to stay afraid. It's important to keep that fear on. We keep saying there's several countries in the world where police brutality is happening. Please, in which country in the world today are young people stopped by the roadside and extorted like armed robbers? In which country today, we can mention their names, are young people extorted at the stations they're supposed to go to safety? In which country today do you have police officers killing people over 100 naira? In which country today do you have people like Bolale Rahim being shot on Christmas Day with babies in her stomach? In which country do you have more than 52,000 people awaiting trials in prison because police just randomly pick up these people from wherever they pick them from and kept them there? If you check the statistics of police reform organizations in Nigeria, you find out that and the people they've been helping to get released from those prisons, there are some people who have spent 10 years in Nigerian prisons without doing anything because police just pick them from the street and put them in there. In which country do you have women being sexually assaulted at the police stations after they have been raped? They go visit the police station to report, and they're still sexually assaulted in those places. In which countries do you have police stations being called abattoirs? Because people go in there and do not come out alive. In which countries do you have mothers begging to see their son dead bodies and saying, please, even if it is dead, it is a dead body you can release it to me, because police officers have refused to release them. In which country do we have police boldly telling citizens that I will shoot you, I will kill you, and nothing will happen? In which country do you have police officers operating like armed robbers? So when we keep saying it happens in other countries, it is a very dangerous narratives. In which country do you have murderers in uniform who, after shooting their victims, instead of taking them to the hospital and say, okay, I've made a mistake, let me take this person to the hospital, they either run away or they carry the body, they put them in the back of their trucks, take them to the station, they leave their own victims to bleed to death.
All right.
Give them the basic human right of medical aid. After all, if they are dead, the dead don't talk. So when we say it happens in every country, in which country can we specifically mention that these things do happen? So again, back to the question, it is about keeping your anger. It is about knowing that the people who are dying, the people who are being extorted, the people who are being brutalized are not from Mars. They are not aliens. They are Nigerians like you and I. And it's not about if it will happen to you, it's about when it will happen to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know someone, I think is Aisha, was saying that today's victims were yesterday's survivor. She keeps saying that to tell you that, I mean, it can actually happen to anyone. There's no special isolatory tag that anybody wears that will exempt you from the ugliness of this if it does happen at any point in time. And Reno, at least, has all of these relevant questions, legitimate questions that you ask, are some of the things that keep the fire, burning, to saying we need to demand that the right thing be done by Nigerians here. And that's where we come to the issue of policy. As much as we look at recommendation, I want to get Kemisid's opinion. That's if your flight hasn't taken off just yet. I know you're still at the airport, as to the strategy that we need to employ. I know you did mention some of it. You said we need to recalibrate our approach to security management. If I were to ask you, how do we go about this really? I mean, this is a question I'm going to ask all of our panelists, because we need to find real ways of addressing it. If it needs to come from a place of legislation, maybe the judiciary, how people. Oh, Ikemesit is airborne already. Okay, that's okay. Mr. Jide Ojo can take that question, and Kemi too would respond to it at some point in time. Bruno will get your also take on that. But Mr. Jide, when it comes to the policy direction here, because people are saying, yes, we saw the police with their reform. They said they came up with a special weapons tactical team. You and I know that either that SWAT team does not have the oxygen to survive. We're not seeing much of it. It's not been well constituted just yet. And there's still elements within the police force that still acts like, NSAS didn't happen. Maybe because there's not enough consequence as to the action of these officers. But in terms of the direction as to how to end state-sponsored violence, which Kemi, I noticed you put up a question and said there's state-sponsored, like what we saw with the NSAS, where someone gave an order and it happened, to a police officer just being trigger happy. I don't know how to separate them in my head, but I know there's some subtle technicalities to separating them also. But Mr. Jide, coming as to how do we address this, in your opinion, state-sponsored violence in Nigeria?
So it's a very tough one. But let me in passing just respond to Rinu. I know she's very angry and she deserves to be angry, but she should not make it look like Nigeria is the worst case and that, you know, every other country, you know, I mean, I used to have a country director when I was in IFS, and he's a Sierra Leonean, and he tells us stories of police brutality in Sierra Leone, that even in terms of exploitation, police will tell their wives to put water on fire while he goes to bring money to buy food. You know, I've seen people also condemning Ghanaian police for all manner of stuff. South African have done similar things. So I'm not, when I flagged that, I wasn't saying, and I did say that I'm not by any stretch of imagination saying what happened in Nigeria or what's happening in Nigeria is condonable or we should bear it. I'm saying that it's a global phenomenon. And until when you have lived in other climes, you will not know the extent of rot in their policing system, you know. But let's leave that, because this is not a dialogue. This is not a, you know, one-on-one dialogue. But in terms of reforms, I think we need to do a lot more to pressurize. And that's where I want to commend Global Right for this initiative, keeping this on the front burner. And I think one of the pressure points will be National Human Rights Commission to demand. National Human Rights Commission has been given a lot of powers, but I don't think they are using much of the powers that have been given them. And being a state institution, I think they are in a poor position to actually demand for much of the reforms or implementation of many of these reforms that have been articulated. They also put out, I mean, they were the one that did the Presidential Committee on Police Brutality. So we can ask, you know, Chief Antonio Ojukwu, SAN, where is he? Where is the National Human Rights Commission with the implementation of that police reforms? Then we have the Police Service Commission. We can also interface with Police Service Commission. They have a new chairman who happens to be former Inspector General of Police, Solomon Arase, who is also a lawyer, to say, where are we with police reforms, you know, issues of discipline. I know for better part of last 2 years, there were issues, the face-off between the Inspector General of Police and the Police Service Commission about recruitment and all of that. But that is another pressure point that we can say, what is happening with the police reform after the SWAT stops, you know, where are we? And we also have Ministry of Police Affairs. I think if it's within the resources of Global Rights, they can initiate a summit on this answers, bring in the Police Service Commission, the National Human Rights, the Police Affairs Ministry, and people in the presidency, those who have the, you know, who have the mandate to implement these reforms, to say, what are you doing? And let me recount some of the things I believe may have been some of the measures that the immediate past administration has taken. I recall that part of what was classified as incentive to violence or police brutality was because of poor welfare. So the immediate past administration of Buhari, you know, set up one, there was an alteration of Police Act 2020. And if you see a trending video done by Lanesik Femi Falana, he was trying to even educate members of the Nigerian police. I can share that with you if it's of interest to us. I shared it on my reel on Facebook a couple of days, was it yesterday? where he was educating the police about what the Police Act 2022 as amended says about issues around police brutality, about torture, about keeping suspects in custody, and if a suspect dies in custody, who is liable and all of that. There isn't sufficient education around the Police Act 2022. Police Act 2020. An organization like Global Rights, an organization like National Human Rights Commission are supposed to, if they have the resources, educate Nigeria and even educate the policemen, the policemen on what the law says. Aside from the amendment of Police Act, there has also been a significant, or maybe if I may not call it significant, there have been some increase in the welfare of the Nigerian police. Recall that the president increased the salaries of members of the Nigerian police, which was implemented around September of last year. There was also the setting up of Police Equipment Trust Fund, which is meant to complement the budgetary allocation to the Nigerian police, which is grossly inadequate in terms of operational, what they need for their operation. So it's not sufficient, but we need to keep talking. We need to demand for accountability, police accountability. There have been cases of stolen equipment, stolen weapons, or unaccountable weapons, which the Auditor General report of, Auditor General report of 2018 revealed that some ammunitions cannot be accounted for. These are some of the things we can discuss at a summit, but more importantly, to demand for those reforms and ask the current administration, where are we? What can we nudge them to do in terms of reforms of the Nigerian police system?
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Jide. I don't know. Okay, thank you very much, sir, for that. We'll get to you. We get to the those who have questions to ask in a bit, but I just want to get Kemi's take on this, looking as we look for, recommendations on how to dealing with all of these things. I mentioned the white paper. Mr. Ojo, when he was talking earlier on, did mention, okay, where we've had compensation and the likes of it. But for example, Lagos State, people would want the detail of that. How does that even merge into, the area of accountability if the state is still holding some of these things close to its chest and not ready to divulge it? Doesn't act like they want people to have all of the details. I mean, you touched on this as we also look at what you see as a recommendation for this. Oh, Abby is also a panelist. I thought she was meant to just give the welcome remark. Abby, I am very sorry. I didn't realize that you were meant to be a part of the panel. Forgive me for that. I didn't realize. Perhaps I should throw this question to you then, Abby. Now that I know, when it comes to the white paper, yes, recommendations have been given, but it's not been made public enough for Nigerians to really interrogate what the recommendations are by the different panels that were set up. Lagos State, the one in Abuja, and in different parts of the country. It'd be one that Nigerians will want to get at least to see what the detailed recommendations are beyond what went viral or what was, leaked at one point in time.
Well, Kim, first that this is a pattern in Nigeria where you set up a committee and they come up with a white paper, they come up with whatever, and that another committee is set up to study the recommendations of that committee, which is also classified and kept away from the public. And then we never hear anything about it anymore. Then we go to the next disaster in Nigeria, and then nobody really thinks about how this, as the demand for accountability is lost in the forays of another crisis. Another committee is then set up to look at those committees. So you need to think about the history, and you need to think about the journey we've made as a country. Where are the recommendations? Where are the Charles Oputa? Justice Oputa recommendations? Where are the ones that Father Kuka was on? Where are all of those crises that we have had time and again? What happened with Zakimbia? That we have not dealt with those issues in the first place, such that
we have a trust deficit in our country, and it was caused by the government, where they say, oh, we will investigate what happened and we will ensure justice is done. Once you say to a Nigerian they are setting up a committee, you think to yourself, that is the end. That's the way people feel about NSAS. And unfortunately, that government is proving them right. 3 years down the line, for most of the states, we still do not have their recommendations, even when they've been received by the state governors, and nothing, absolutely nothing has been done, and nobody's holding those governors accountable. And it's very difficult as well when you think about our judicial system and the disarray that it is in right now, to ask for them to enforce the publications of those things, which often governments will come back to say are sealed by security issues. And so we're not there yet. And that our protests, as long as we don't have what those recommendations are, as long as justice is not done, as long as the people who killed innocent Nigerians are walking the streets free, as long as those who gave that command are still in the ranks and file of the military, and maybe still in government, maybe have left government, maybe they're in Daura, wherever they may be, as long as they've not served justice, those recommendations, those papers are useless. The works of the committees are useless. And people must get bold that when they put you on committees, it is not so that you get stipends. It is so that you ensure that justice is done and that the country works, which you're not doing.
All right. You know, while we're talking, Abby, about the judiciary enforcing the publication of this, I had a smile on my face, because it would have to be another huge demand to say, hey, publish this. Let people know what was recommended, because all we got, particularly for Lagos, was the leak. And they said that was not the main content of it. And Lagos state government said when they're good and ready, they would. But nothing till date beyond pockets of compensation.
They're still not good. They're still not ready. You still have that same man re-elected as governor of Lagos State, which also means us as citizens, we still don't fully understand what our mandate is, what the Constitution requires of us to hold these people accountable, to ensure that they fulfill the primary purpose of governance, which they're not fulfilling in any way. Babajide Sanwo-Olu is walking about freely in Lagos and still hasn't released that. Is back second term as governor of Lagos State, still hasn't done anything. Audio governance.
All right, then. Kemi, I wanted to get your thoughts in terms of what your recommendation is. We'll get back to you, Abby, on that. I want to hear Kemi's take, and then we'll get questions and contribution from those who are participating in this webinar also. Kemi?
Thanks, Abby. If I may, you know, we've had series of efforts on reform of the police in Nigeria, and recently been thinking about what the challenges have been with the reform initiatives we've had in the country. And one of such is the fact that the police is seen as a, I'll say, as a private or group, goods that the political sector and the elites want to capture, because you believe that once you control the police, you have the police in your pocket, you can control systematically different aspects of the government, of the country, right?
Yeah.
And that, for as long as that remains, for as long as we have elite capture, you notice I say elite capture and not only political and elite capture needs to be broken over the police itself.
Yeah.
2, the police is resistance to change. The government is resistant to change. You and I are resistant to change. Change is not something we easily embrace. Then over time, I also feel that, yes, we talk about the context in which policing takes place in the country, in our country, Nigeria. A lot of times we always would only talk about the issue of colonial military legacy, forgetting that in the 21st century, we're still dealing with issues of youth bulge. We're dealing with issues of limited or lack of education, lack of infrastructure, right? Minimal resources. And so they also operate within this framework. Because they operate within this framework, those that have access to state resources keep them under to a good extent. The Police Act 2020 provides an opportunity it provided an opportunity to legalize a lot of good practices that had been initiated over time in the reform efforts. But is the Police Act being implemented? That's another story. We're not implementing the act. If you look at the Police Act 2020, at the core of it is respect for rights. It speaks to respect for rights of citizens. It speaks to protection of citizens, irrespective of gender, irrespective of age, irrespective of social class. Is the police being reoriented in line with the Police Act? The answer is no. So when my brother Jide Ojo says civil society should train the police, I'm like, no, civil society is not government. Civil society, we've done our bit and we will continue to do our bit. Our bit is advocacy. Our bit is to raise the issues. But the government itself must be committed in ensuring that they want to build institutions and organizations that are based on the premise of the rule of law. We cannot shy away from that. Within the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Chapter 4, one of our fundamental rights is the right to life and the right to dignity of person. But we find that the right to life in Nigeria is not protected either by the state, even with individuals. Extrajudicial killings is like this, either by the police, mob action, conflicts rising, citizens taking up arms against each other without us even going to the medical field, where medical negligence is ripe. If this government wants to do anything, prioritize that everything you are doing is anchored on the rule of law. Prioritize the right to life and the right to dignity of person. Take security sector reform on these three elements. Then you can now start talking about development. Then we can now start talking about education. Then we can now start talking about other things. Those things cannot stand on anything. It's like building on what's this, this children's nursery rhyme, the Three Little Pigs, the first house of straw, the second one with wood, and then you're talking brick. If you want to build your house on bricks, it has to stand on three elements. First, rule of law, then security sector reform, and the right to life. Then every other thing is layered on that. Thank you.
All right, security sector reform. This is where we open the phone line and get... I sounded almost like I was on radio, but we'd hand the mic to those who have questions or comment to make. But this time it will be tops 1 minute. So just straight to the point, just drop the point you want to make. And if you're not sure that you can manage the time properly, you can just send it as a chat and I will read as much as possible. So with a show of hands, just let me know if you want to make any contribution. You've been listening and you want to make any contribution. Let's see. I saw Mashoud, I think Mashoud wanted to speak at one point in time. Mashoud Folorunsho, you can contribute. That's if Mashoud is still around. Am I seeing him anywhere around? Okay.
I say Mashoud is still there, but maybe he's not.
All right.
Mashoud Folorunsho.
Yeah, Mashoud Folorunsho. Okay, Theophilus Adeleke, let's just hear your take since Mashoud is not ready. Theophilus, you want to speak? Because I didn't see any message from you. So just go ahead. You can unmute your mic and speak.
Okay. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity. So, though there's not much progress from what it was 3 years ago when the movement took place. However, I want to state that at least we've seen some gains from when the movement took place and now. And these gains.
What are the gains? Just quickly, maybe mention one or two
is
of
part of
them.
the political awareness that.
Uh-oh. All right, Mashoud, I think your connection is a bit rusty. So thank you very much. Let's hear from Smith Mwokocha. Smith, you can unmute and make your contribution. We're having challenge with Mashoud's connection.
That we add more.
Is that Mashoud? All right, Mashoud, your connection is really bad. It's going off and on. I don't know if it's just from my end alone. So let's just get to hear from Smith Mwokocha. Hello, Smith. You can unmute your mic and speak. Okay, I do not think Smith is ready either.
I am. I just saw the audio now. I was unable to unmute myself. Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Just quickly, I equally want to appreciate all the facilitators, for Global Rights for putting up this. Yeah. For me, I think is a touching moment, to be sincere, because I don't want to use the word massacre. I want to be careful with my words, but a lot of young people lost their life, during these protests at the time it happened. But just a good side of it is that, yes, there has been in River State, let me use that place as a point of where I am actually. I think police have been able to improve relatively. There are things that happen here and they even hold them on custody. You see them arresting some of the police officials that are involved in police brutality after the NSAS movement, so to speak. But my question would be that how do we actually put, I don't know if we can put this to a rest, but how do we also go back and touch the life of the Protestants, they lost their life, and even the one that are in exile. One of the facilitators mentioned about DJ Switch. She's a Nigerian, but she's somewhere far from Nigerian. How do we put this thing to rest and even, bring them back home? And I don't know, but so I want to hear from the facilitators, how do we actually bring this to rest? Because this memory is not really a good one. Each time is 20, 10, 20 or so, like October 20th is always time to like, how did this happen? So how can we make this a better memory than what happened? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Smith, for that. And I guess Mashoud was trying to say some of the gains from that is the political awareness that was gained. Afterwards, we see people coming together and, having their strong opinion expressed legitimately through the different provisions we have in our laws. And we, to a certain degree, saw it also in the 2023 election. Thank you very much for that. I'm not seeing any other hands up, so I want to believe that all the questions, we don't have much time anyway, so if your hand isn't up already, I'm afraid we have to move past because we have like 7 minutes and I'm trying to stick to the clock tonight so that we'll wrap up at 8:30 as advertised. So I will go back to our panelists and you can respond to the question by Smith as you also give us your closing remark and recommendation. I know that Mr. Ojo, you already did talk about if Global Rights they can initiate a summit, bring in all those with the mandate. You know, you mentioned several stakeholders from Human Rights, Police Service Commission, Ministry of Police Affairs, and the likes of that to discuss and address these issues, which is one of the recommendations that you put forward. Kemi also did talk about prioritizing right to life and dignity of persons and reform in the security sector, which is also one way in which we can address some of these things. I would love to hear Rinu's recommendation and Abby's as we wind down this conversation. We have just 6 minutes, so I'll be really grateful if you can just give that in, say, a minute, 30 seconds each. I will start with you, Rinu.
Yes, thank you very much. And I would like to, say thank you to the ED of Global Rights and Madam Kemi as well, for those very succinct explanation, because I feel like there's some things that I want to say, but when other people have said them, you're just like, yeah, that's it. For the policy recommendations or the other recommendations, just like the ED of Global Rights have said, there've been a lot of panels. There've been a lot of policy recommendations. In fact, the judicial panels that finished sitting, a year, 2 years ago, they made recommendations too. I was part of the judicial panel. I was part of the young people representative on the judicial panel. And I left because just like the ED of Global Rights have said, your right is not to collect stipends. Your right is to ensure justice. My job is not on the panel, was not just to finish and say, oh, I did a panel for the government. It was to ensure that justice was done. And if justice has not been done, then what are you doing there in the first place? And so it's not about more policy recommendations. It's about the policies that we already have, the acts that we already have, the laws that we already have. Are they being utilized? Are they being used? Are they being followed? And just like Madam Kemi had said, civil society, when we say, oh, we need to train the police on human rights, I'm sorry, I understand the rationale behind it, I don't believe in it. Because nobody can tell me that a police does not know that he's not supposed to shoot at someone. He's not supposed to eat a gun on their head. He's not supposed to steal from them. He's not supposed to be an arm robber stealing from them. So when we say, oh, let us train the police to know that they are supposed to respect our fundamental human, it's what they know already. It's because the climate of corruption and impunity in Nigeria has not ceased. And thank God that the ED already said it as well. The citizens do not know their job. We don't know our mandate to be able to say, if you cannot stop this climate of impunity and corruption, then you have to go. We have to vote you out. But we keep voting the same people who are trampling upon our human rights, who are using the police, manipulating the police, using them as weapons of oppression against us. And that's the problem. The problem for me is a climate of impunity and corruption. And that is why I believe that we cannot be putting plasters on bandage. We cannot be putting bandage or plasters on wounds anymore, on big wounds. So one of the things that we did today, in collaborations with other 4 organizations, because I direct Project Connect Up, where we're trying to document as many of names and cases and human rights violations as we can. Together with EDFO Foundation, Pro Bono Center, at OBN bars, we're trying to, we've launched, in fact, it was launched today at Yaba, Lagos, the Joint Action Against Police Violence, because we do not believe that one organization can keep doing the fight. We can't keep doing this fight individually. As long as police brutality hasn't stopped in Nigeria, civil society organizations, civil society actors cannot stop talking, cannot stop the fight. So we've decided to form a coalition of civil society organizations to address this prevalent issue of police brutality, because you can trace a straight line from the police brutality that is happening to the amount of people, innocent Nigerians, that are waiting trials in prison because they found themselves there. So JAPOG is Joint Action Against Police Violence, a coalition formed to address, the prevalent issue of police brutality and human rights organizations in Nigeria. And we're looking at specifically targeting police violence, wrongful incarceration. We're looking at a lot of legal actions. So these days you're just going to be seeing, because one of the reforms that needs to be done for me, that I believe needs to be implemented, is that police officers should be able to be sued themselves, right? Sometimes there's a police NG has done something, we be able to sue this specific police officer and drag them to court. So that's one of the things, and you can't do all of this, without joint action. You can't do all of this without money. And that is one thing JAPOB is about. So we're inviting civil rights organizations to join in this fight of ensuring that Nigerians can live in peace and dignity in their own countries. There are a lot of other things that JAPOF is going to be doing, but then that's for me one of the steps that I believe that we've taken decisively today to address this issue. I don't think we can train the police. It's not the role of civil society organizations to train the police. It's not also the role of civil society organizations to do anything regarding police reform except the government does them. But then one of the things civil society can ensure is that police and other law enforcement agencies that violate the rights of Nigerians pay for it through their nose, and that we don't allow this to be swept under the table, or the water should pass under the bridge anyhow. So yeah, thank you. That's one of the things that will.
Thank you very much, Renu, for that. Abby would get your
started today. Thank you.
All
and
right.
Then for the
Thank
closing
you.
remarks, I think that Nigerians should not be afraid of living in their own country. Nigerians should not be afraid of the people who are supposed to protect them. And as long as we're afraid of these people, we must not stop fighting. We must not stop speaking up. Because again, it's not about if it will happen to you. It's about when it's going to happen to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Abby? I see Kemi's comment says CSOs work across different spectrum, demand and supply, and that the National Human Rights Commission is making moves to compile all the reports of the judicial panels from across the country. Thank you very much for that, Kemi. I see that. Is Abby are you still here?
I'm still here.
All right then. Yes.
Okay, so in summary for me, we're not yet an independent country. October 1st has come and gone again, 61 years later or 62 years later. We're still not an independent country. 63 years later, we're still not an independent country. We need to decolonize governance in Nigeria. We need to decolonize law enforcement in Nigeria. While it's easy to point out all the things that have gone wrong and are wrong with Nigeria, I'd just like to applaud the things that have gone right, because of the people who have done the work of reform in our country. I'd like to thank Kemi Okenyodo and the late Innocent Chukwuma for the work they've done on police reform in this country. Without their contribution to police reform, the jungle would be worse than it is today. They have done extensive work. It's what she has said about the police, it not being the job of civil society to reform the police, which she's right about. But if you've worked 20 years on reforming security law enforcement in Nigeria, you know what you're talking about. So the sleepless nights that Kemi Okenyodo has put into security reform in Nigeria must be recognized, must be respected, must be applauded. I'd like to applaud Renu. Renu, you always have my heart. 3 years on, in spite of what Nigeria has shown you in 3 years, in spite of everything that you've done, that you've not stopped loving, sacrificing on a daily basis for this country. Now, it might feel like little progress you've made over time, but then posterity will remember you and what you've done for Nigeria. You're one of the reasons we still have a country today. Mr. Ojo, on a daily basis, you're out there, you're putting those articles, those thoughts into place. You're asking questions about development and you're working towards them. I see Mr. Smith and Wakocha. I see Edosa as well. And I see you, Kim. I see the people on this call. I see the people beyond this call. I've been in the studio with you a few times, Kim. Not every OAP is as committed and as devoted to this nation, to the dream of seeing a Nigeria that works in our lifetime. And I am grateful for that. So for this pocket of work that is being done every day, for people like Mohammed, who is on this call and is very silent, but is one of the people who on a daily basis, in spite of the trauma, verifying each single mass atrocity in this country, causes him and the personal loss that he has also suffered in Borno State, continues on a daily basis and continues to insist that this country will work. I am grateful for men like Muhammad. I am grateful for every single person who wakes up on a daily basis and says that the Nigeria in my time will work. And if it doesn't work in my time, that I will ensure that it will work for posterity. Kudos to you. We have state capture, we have elite capture, we have all of the things going on with the political class in our country. But for the people who work for this country, I am assured that the labor of our heroes past, that their sacrifices will never be in vain. Thank you all.
Thank you very, very much. And just appreciative of all that you've said and what Global Right is doing and represent also. And a lot of people are sending their thanks in. So thank you very much. Mr. Ojo, want to thank you very much for being here. Your recommendations are noted and what you see as the best way to go about this. Kemi, okay.
Sorry, King. If I can just say one word, what I will ultimately recommend is for us as civil society to also get involved in public interest litigation. That has been used effectively by public interest litigation.
Yes, we if you remember the Apo killings, where it was decided that Nigeria was in the state of warfare, where the soldiers had gone and killed the Keke Napep people, we put in that litigation. We got that judgment, and there are many cases that are still stuck in court, 10 years, 15 years after. So yes, active litigation is going on. We just also need to ensure that citizens are carried along and that they're updated on the status of those cases. So yes, we are.
Mr. Joe? Well, at least that answers it, yes?
Yes, I'm just putting it out there. So, Global Right is doing it. Let some others, if they are able to get funding, also do more, which will enforce. And it's a long chain. Something was flagged earlier about judicial reform. In spite of Administration of Criminal Justice Act, which says that criminal prosecution should happen on a daily basis and should not be more than 6 months. We've had cases still going into years. That's why the case of Bolanle Rahim is celebrated that it could happen in 9 months. If it does happen like that, there will be this climate of impunity, this culture of impunity will possibly not be as pervasive as it is. But like Abby said, with long years of prosecution, if you don't have sufficient funds to get this litigation on, you are bound to be tired, and it's very tiring going through the court system, given that justice is always delayed, and that is denying justice in the real sense of it. But, let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep it in front burner. We shall overcome someday soon.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Ojo, that's another story. There are challenges of infrastructure and other related issues in court. Kemi mentioned, sets that one out. And Edosa, to the young Nigerians who defied the bullet of armed uniformed men and in unison sang the national anthem of a nation that was crying to be rescued and watched on as their fellow compatriots dropped to the cold ground at the Lekki toll gate. I say, may the honor or the labor, I beg your pardon, of these heroes never be in vain. Smith Wankocha, God bless you greatly, ma'am, for all you do for humanity. We see you, we see your team also at Global Right. Namdi, to everyone, thank you to Global Right, especially to the ED Abiodun Bio, and to the very good panelists for this very important discussion. Thank you, Kimberly, thank you very much. We'll definitely continue this discussion and the push for necessary action into the future. Best regards to all. Namdi Obasi, our International Crisis Group. I see you also. And quite a number of these comments. Thank you very much for all your comments and your contribution. One thing established from all of our panelists is we need to continue this conversation until we get to the favorable results that we want. I know we talk about police brutality being global, but there are countries where their record is almost zero. when it comes to these issues, and we can be that country also. We just need to put in the work, because we've had reports of human rights abuses, state-sponsored violence against citizens, just one too many in Nigeria, and it needs to end. So talking about reform of the security sector, policy reforms, prioritizing the right to life and dignity, and also implementing the Police Act of 2020, which is something that Kemi mentioned. Having a summit where you bring all of those with the mandates to have this conversation, decolonizing governance in Nigeria and government generally is also something that we need to work at in Nigeria. And Renew also did talk about the efforts they're putting in to sue police officers. But it has to be a collective effort nonetheless. So work, we still need to continue to push and do more. And I guess... Hello?
About what Global Rights is doing.
Okay. Okay, Reno, if you can say that in, say, 60 seconds or less, I would appreciate, because we've shot past the time already, but go ahead. Oh, is it me? Is it frozen from my end, or Reno, I can't hear you. I know you wanted to speak, but it's gone up.
It's frozen at Reno's end.
Oh, okay. All right, I think at this point it's time for us to wrap it up. It's been an amazing conversation and a lot to distill from the discourse tonight. And it also tells you that there's so much more to unpack when it comes to police brutality in Nigeria. There are layers to it that we need to deal with. But I'm also confident that Nigeria can get to the point where we can have zero records, such that when Global Right will put out its report, it will not be about the number of people killed within a record time. It's to also account that we're getting to see a decline, and record months or years where we do not have any state-sponsored brutality. It's doable. It's happening in some parts of the world, and it can happen here also. So thank you very much. I know there will be a vote of thanks from Global Right. Abby?
Oh, yes.
You've said it already, Edosa.
I think I have, but then let me say it again, and to say thank you very much for being part of this conversation and for being one of the people who would want to normalize a country that works, where justice reigns. So thank you very much. And thank you, Kim, for leading this very, very important conversations. We hope that you will join our social media handle at Global Rights NG and also at Nigeria Mourns. And you will support the work we do by doing your own part in making this country work. So thank you. Edosa may have as well.
No, Abby is just fine. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Kibali, and thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to the Executive Director of Global Right, Abiodun Bayo, and to our panelist, Kemi Okeodo, Executive Director of Partners West Africa, Nigeria. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, Stajite Ojo, Executive Director of Oja Development Consult, and Ikemesit Efyong, who had to leave at some point in time. We thank you to Renew Odwala, keep the fire burning and the energy up. Thank you very much for all that you do. To Global Rights, Nigerian Mourns, we say thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. And I'm sure you're going to take some of the recommendations and discussions forward to seeing how we can get solutions to the challenge that is a collective problem for all of us in the country. So this is where I say good night. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim. Well done. Bravo.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Edosa the Ghanaian.
Hello, Abby. Good to see you again.
How do I get my shito? There's this woman very close to Mokola Market, very close to the car park. Oh, I can't describe it very well. There are a few others. But how do I get my shito?
Abby, getting it is not the getting it for me is
Don't
not
worry,
the
you
issue.
will get it to me. You will when there's a will, there are relatives.
Indeed.
But how
I
is it
didn't know.
going?
I didn't know you knew this man. He sent his regard. The man I said mentioned the round table at the AU Commission at the meeting last month. Mentioned our round table. Mr. Dr. John Ikumaba of AU Commission.
Okay.
He kind of knows you and know you, and
okay.
and then he
We'll
was
take
asking
our
so much.
conversation. Apparently, we're still on. We're still on Zoom and
Oh.
live.
Okay, well, it's just our volunteers that are on now.
So okay, yes, but apparently we're on YouTube. Let me stop recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So you people have punished me enough. Let me go.
Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you very much.
We missed
Thank
you at the
you.
time.
Yes, ma. We were at the last final session at the time when we were very.
I knew that you were still at sessions.
Yeah.
So it's okay. We'll talk.
All
I
right,
need to
Abby.
right now.
Thank you very much.
14 minutes late. Okay. All right. Take
Okay.
care.
All right. Thank you very much.